This morning we have Dr. Valda Henry here to discuss central banks. Central banks and regulatory services worldwide face a persistent and significant gender gap in leadership. While men still outnumber women in financial institutions, the numbers are slowly improving as data shows the value women bring to teams. However, only 46% of employees in the finance sector are women, 15% of which hold executive positions. Why is this? Today, we're talking about breaking the glass ceiling, and as I mentioned before, we have Dr. Valda Henry with us to shed light on her journey to becoming the first female deputy governor with the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank and her lessons along the way. A native to the Commonwealth of Dominica, Dr. Henry brings a wealth of experience to her role with over 20 years of experience in the public, private, and financial sectors. Dr. Henry, welcome to Good Morning SKN, and it's a pleasure to have you here.
Indeed, welcome.
Good morning, thank you, and it is indeed a pleasure to be here. And I say good morning to all our listeners, and especially our listeners in our member states of the ECCU. Today is Antigua's independence celebrations anniversary, and I'm decked out in the Antigua and Barbuda national wear.
And you mentioned you have a national wear for all the OECS countries.
Yes, indeed, of our member states. And so on the September 19th, I was in full St. Kitts and Nevis regalia.
Fantastic.
And as I said to them, you know, some of you don't even have the full regalia. You all need to get it.
Soon.
And then on Thursday was St. Vincent and the Grenadines, 45th independence anniversary. I was also dressed in my St. Vincent outfit. And on today, I'm in Antigua. And on Thursday is my homeland's 44th independence anniversary. And you know, I will be in full regalia.
Very decked out. Dr. Henry, I think one of the first things we'd like to talk about is women in the financial industry. And few women in the world can say they have the title of central bank governor in their name. Why do you think this is?
I think to some extent, although before I answer that, let me kind of just say, at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, this is not the case. In the executive of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, there are 2 females and 1 male. So we represent 66% as females.
Nice, congrats.
In the heads of department, 70% are women. In the management team, it goes out to something like another 65%. So at ECCB, this is not the case. So women have broken the ceilings or continue to break the ceilings at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. If we look at some of the other central banks in our region, say in Barbados, we also had, I think she was the first female governor in Barbados and maybe for the Caribbean. And so that's happening. But I think sometimes while you have a lot of women in maybe banking, and even in central banking, sometimes women themselves do not aspire for those positions. They put other things as priorities. So they have families, they have the children, you know, and we see that. I mean, there are individuals who I've spoken to, women staff members, even at ECCB, and who say to you that these are the priorities. Then, of course, you also have maybe a little bit of bias. Earlier this year, I was at a seminar, and that was one of the discussions that women, even when you look at women in leadership at the central banks, even the kind of coverage that they get is so slightly different. And so they were actually looking at media clippings of stories. And so the media clippings, when it was a male governor or male deputy governor who had spoken, it got highlighted so much more than if it was a female governor or female deputy governor, because actually there are a number of female governors, even in Africa. Recently we were at the World Bank IMF meetings, and I met about 3 of and I was a bit surprised because I didn't even realize, I mean, that you had these female governors all over. Seychelles as a female, governor. So I think sometimes it's a little bias against women, but I think also sometimes it's women who choose for a variety of other reasons, to not pursue that career to get to the top. To get to the top. So that's part of the reason.
So, Ms. Henry, you are the first female in this position of a deputy governor at the in the Eastern Caribbean region. What does this tell you about the future of the banking industry?
Well, I have always said, and I guess it's maybe from my upbringing.
Okay.
My father always said to us that the only limitations we face were those we placed on ourselves.
Right.
Nice.
That we could be anything, go anywhere, and do anything that we wanted to do. So even when I saw that and everyone was saying, you know, for me, it wasn't like a big deal in that sense, in the sense that I figured out if I wanted it, I could aspire for it.
Nice.
And I think me being the first female deputy governor at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank also signals to the world, but signal to women and young girls that nothing is out of your reach.
Nothing, indeed.
That if you conceive it, you can achieve it.
Okay.
But in order to achieve it, it's not
work.
just a wish.
You have to work for it, right?
You have to do the work
Right.
to get there.
Indeed.
And I think that is what it says. And what is the work to get there? As I always say to person, it doesn't matter what is your field. You have to just put your best foot forward.
Indeed.
Always.
Always.
So there's no day where you can take a holiday and say, well, today I'm just not doing well. Because you know what? People forget the 99 good days you had.
Indeed.
Correct.
And they remember that one day.
One day, yeah.
You know, and I noted that very early in my career. Because I was a teacher. I always say to people, that's my passion. That's my vocation, to teach.
Nice.
And every day, when I went to that classroom, I said, Val, before I left my home, I said, Valda Henry, you have to be your best self.
Yes.
I like that.
Because the students are not going to remember the whole year of being great.
Yes.
They're going to remember the one day that you were not your best self.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I prepared every night my lesson plan.
Nice.
So you know, in those days, I don't know if they still do it. You had this book and you had to prepare lesson plans and so forth and so on. And I made sure my lesson plans, I normally use my weekend to prepare my lesson plan for the week ahead. And then every night before, review this stuff.
Yes.
Make sure I've gone over my material I'm going to teach. And then make sure I know my students.
Yes.
Right.
So that you could cater to the needs of your students, because children have different needs. You know, they're not just all in a blanket.
Yes.
And to be an effective teacher, you have to know how to reach each child.
Indeed.
Right.
That's
And
true.
so I kind of made that my goal, and I've just carried that throughout all of my life's journey.
Good
You know,
stuff.
wherever I have found myself working.
Right.
Indeed.
And it sounds like impact is very important to you in all of the roles that you take on. So how have you been able to impact and drive a focus on inclusive policy design and practices within the bank, and certainly on a broader scale within the financial regulatory space?
I must say, and I have to commend Governor Antoine, Timothy N.G. Antoine, because as the deputy, you're not the leader. Right? There's only one leader. My role, as I see it, is to support the governor in the achieving of the goals and the vision of the ECCB. And what is our vision, in a nutshell? I love it, and I always say that is what brought me to ECCB. Our whole goal is the transformation of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, advancing the good of our people, where they not just strive, but they thrive.
Yes.
Right.
Because, you know, if we think of ourselves, there's a lot of striving in our region.
Yes.
People can hardly make $2 meet. At the end of the month, they are broke, they are. And you can't really grow so much if you are worrying about how to feed your children, how to pay your rent, how to pay your mortgage. You cannot be your best self then.
You are correct.
It takes away from you. I always say there's no real independence if there's no financial independence. And so our job is to ensure our region thrive. And you ask, what's my role in doing that? One of the things I see is in terms of my staff, as I say to them always at ECCB, that transformation has to start with us.
Yes.
We can't transform any region if we're not transforming how and what we do at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank.
Yes.
And I'm fortunate that I have been assigned the responsibility for change management and culture at the bank. And so one of my real jobs, the things that really gives me great pleasure is how do we? And so one of the things I've already done, and it has been approved, is our framework for change management and culture. Nice. Then we've started appointing our change champions. We have started, you know, saying to them what it is, so that all our staff is on the same vision role of what it is we're going. So there's not lack of clarity. There has to be clarity on how we are going to do that transformation.
Yes.
And while, yes, there may be different styles to it, because you may choose it to do it differently,
Yes.
Right.
but the goal is the same.
Yes.
And so that is part of what it is I'm doing
Right.
in terms of our transformation of the ECCB and the impact. And then, of course, you know, I've had the opportunities to engage with persons from, you know, from down we did Gingerland Secondary School
Yes.
recently, and that was actually really very good engagement, but also with the private sector,
Of course.
with our LFIs, our banks, which is really the core of what makes central banking, you know, because financial stability and economic development
Yes.
is one of our key mandates. And the regulation of the LFIs is critical in that the licensed financial institutions, many of the banks and some of the other institutions, and the engagement at that level. Yes, so.
So you were a teacher.
Yeah.
You are into banking now, which is big
Well,
job.
I wasn't actually banking before, you know, because I was at ECCB prior.
To being a teacher?
No, after being a teacher, I was a teacher first. That's my first job.
ECCB?
No. Before I came to ECCB, I worked for the government of Dominica.
Okay.
I was the coordinator of the Administrative Reform Program.
Okay.
And that was a very challenging but very fulfilling job because, you know, to
Right.
transform that civil service isn't easy because, you know, setways and so forth.
Yes,
But
yes.
I was, you know, able to work together with some of the team to get a lot of the reforms done.
Okay.
And I was kind of always heartened that years after I left the government of Dominica, and I was working at ECCB, and when we had got back on a mission after Hurricane Nui, I was part of the team assessing the damage done throughout the region that the former Prime Minister, Dame Eugenia Charles,
Okay.
Right.
you know, said to me then, because, you know, we had a little kind of rocky relationship then during my time, yeah? But said to me then that she admired me.
That's sweet.
And I was like, uh-huh. And she said, yes, I admired you for your gumption, you know? She said,
Right.
you know, because she would say sometimes no to some things. And if I really felt that that no was not a justified no,
You too.
I would persist
Okay.
until that no became a yes.
Okay. Good stuff.
Great.
And so she said, so that's what, she never said that in my tenure. But years later, she said that was one of the things that she admired about me, my gumption. And that is true. I really don't just take a no for that, you
Right.
know? And then after I left there, I worked for a little bit in the Ministry of Trade, and then I left to go to UWI to teach. So I taught at UWI.
Oh, okay.
Even prior to teaching at UWI, while I was doing my PhD, I taught at the University of Warwick and the University of Coventry.
Okay.
And then after that, I came to ECCB after I left UWI. And I was a senior investment officer, investing the reserves of our region to ensure that our financial backing and our backing ratio remains strong and stable. And when I left that, I went to do my PhD, and then I came back and I went into consulting.
Yeah, I see HR.
And I was first with my sister's firm, and then in 2015, I branched out on my own.
Okay, nice.
And I led VFing for 15 years before I came back to ECCB as the deputy governor. So I've been like around.
You've been around.